The first thing I've always done pretty well is had a strong relationship with my calendar.
Some people think that it's even impossible to shine if you don't have a huge following or audience and no publisher will look at you. Can you tell more how it happened with you? Like, how did you build these relationships?
I would also suggest thinking about what good enough looks like for you, because as creative people, we can be perfectionists and that can actually get in our way. What's the worst that'll happen? Usually it's like not that big of a deal.
Grow, rise, open minds, wisdom shines, it never blinds. They are Growthmates.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growthmates. I'm Kate Syuma, and I'm so happy to have you here today on this new season that I hope you are enjoying. It's called The Creator's Path, where I invite people who create things, different things. Sometimes they are doing this as a full-time job. Sometimes they are creating stuff on the side. And today we have exactly this story. And I invited Catt Small, who is staff designer at Dropbox, but she's a creator of so many things, like a book and the course, and also the gamer community and events. And I'm curious to talk to her about all this stuff. So, Kat, welcome to Growthmates. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, it's a beautiful day here in New York City. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Super. I think when we will publish it, it will be already, I don't know, springtime or something like that. And we will be thinking about December, Christmas time, all this magic as we are trying to experience it today. And I think, yeah, December, at least for me, it associates with creativity, with thinking about next year plans and like what can we do like next year, what we can start doing. But before we dive into all of these things, happy to hear about you. I already mentioned a few things about your background, but you can do a better job by introducing yourself properly. Anything that I've missed? How do you call yourself today? Who you are?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've been in the world of user experience and product design at this point for 15 years, a little over 15 years. And I've always been interested in fine art, visual arts, really just like using the various forms of visual media as a way to express oneself and also help other people. And so when I initially got into design, I was also exploring the world of video games and interactive media at the same time. And I really liked that world. Like both worlds, honestly, are just really interesting to me. And so one thing I had to decide relatively early on was how to go about, what my relationship with each was going to be. And so I decided to go full time into user experience and product design
Mm.
because I felt like it was a more stable foundation. The games industry is just a bit more challenging and inconsistent, and a lot of people have found it, possible to find a job, but it can be kind of the work can come in waves. So I found that user experience generally was much more consistent and reliable. So I decided to make that my full-time focus. And I've worked at lots of great places, including Etsy, SoundCloud. I worked at NASDAQ a couple of times. And I've learned so much from those places. Asana also. And yeah, currently, I'm employed where I am. And then in my spare time, I make video games and participate in the gaming community at large. And I feel like that's been really fun for me. And then, I also love to teach. And so I found a way to make that part of my practice as well.
This is incredible. And when I talk to people like you who are doing so many things in parallel and they have a full-time job, there is like an obvious question. How do you find time for all of this? It seems like absolutely impossible, at least for me, but I want to reveal that myth. And maybe you can tell more. How do you practically find time for major projects like writing a book? Like sometimes I want to write a book and I struggle to find this focus time. Yeah, so today I was reading a story how John Rowling actually started writing Harry Potter, and for her, like, it was pretty traumatic experience, but having a break of maternity leave, I think she managed to spend that time, and it was a crisis for her as well, to start writing. So it wasn't from, like, let's say, the positive experience, it was more from the negative. However, for us, like very busy people in a busy world, how do you manage to find time for these amazing things?
Yeah, I think that the first thing I've always done pretty well is had a strong relationship with my calendar. So I think the number one thing you have to do is to understand how much time you have available to you within the span of about a week. Because if you aren't aware of that, then it's going to be hard to fit in projects in addition to your workday. So, for example, if you have a job that's 40 hours a week, that means that you have a certain amount of time outside of that to do extra work. If you are working more than 40 hours a week, then you're just going to have less time for hobbies and your family
Mm,
and all the other things you might want to do with your spare time. So it's really important to actually assess your availability and all of your priorities first. So in my case, I've had various stages of my life, but at the same time, I'm not like, I don't have like a lot of responsibilities. So at most, I've had like a partner and friends and family that I need to make sure that I'm maintaining contact with. So I will acknowledge that that in itself does give me a fair amount of time just because I don't have children. But even if that were the case, one thing that I would make sure to do is just to essentially set a goal of, what am I trying to do? And then you can break down the outcome that you're looking to actually achieve into smaller steps. So,
mm,
when it comes to writing, for example, gladly Rosenfeld Media had a lot of guidance for me. But essentially, I sat down pretty much every morning and just wrote as much as I could for like even, 20 minutes or something like that, 10, 20 minutes. If you do that every day for like 9 months, you'll actually have a lot to pull from. And so that was one thing that I noticed is, it's really about taking a small step toward the ultimate outcome. When it came to the book in particular, there was an actual deadline. So, my essentially, I started, I think, in like July of last year. And then I
mm,
needed to finish half the book by December, I think it was. And so, I had a work back plan from December, to where I was at that point. And then it was like, right, every single day we had check ins and things like that as well. So accountability is really important for sure. And then I think the second big date, there was another date that was like April or something like that. And so I needed to finish pretty much the entirety of the book, I think, by April. And so, once I had 50% done in December, then, it's the home stretch. But yeah, I would say what I've learned from that for sure is, the little steps matter just as much as the final outcome. So, working toward it every single day. Ideally, if you can have people around you who can give you feedback and who can kind of be supportive and not, be like a cop or something like that when it comes to accountability. But there should be people around you who, you can share updates with, for example. And those
mm.
people can, kind of, be visual reminders that you need to do the work that you want to do. And then, yeah, you can set deadlines for yourself. I find that if I don't have a goal in mind of like a particular time, then I'll just keep working on something pretty much forever. And then I would also suggest thinking about what good enough looks like for you, because as creative people, we can be perfectionist and that can actually get in our way. So, understanding like where's the line at which I should stop and I've done enough that I can kind of move on. I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely. And I'm still thinking about how to find time, but I think the way we should think about that is how to make time and just make time for things. So, from your story about creating a book, I definitely would love to dive deeper into that. I'm curious personally, and I have a dream of writing a book someday, but everything starts from the initial idea, and I have plenty of ideas, and I'm sure people have plenty of ideas and figuring out how to choose the right one, and then figuring out how to even build these relationships with the publisher is pretty difficult starting point. Some people think that it's even impossible to shine if you don't have a huge following or audience and no publisher will look at you. Can you tell more how it happened with you? Like, how did you build these relationships with Rosenfeld? Yeah, it's pretty well-known publisher. And did they say yes immediately, or you had to pitch certain ideas and then you had to change them completely? So how was it?
Yeah, it was a multiple year process. So, essentially, the first thing was setting the foundation. So, I wrote a lot on my own website. So, if you go to cattsmall.com, CATT, you'll just see like years worth of blog posts there. And essentially, I would like write my feelings about design and design collaboration and things like that. And then I would just post them on social media. And through the grapevine, essentially, like I'm in New York, and Rosenfeld is also located in New York. So
Hmm.
I think like the New York City design scene, because I was writing all of these posts, people would, kind of find them and like read them and share feedback about the things that I was writing about. And essentially, I'm pretty sure that that is how Rosenfeld Media got wind of my existence. And that I think we essentially I got invited to participate on a like an editorial board where I reviewed pitches from people, and that was back in like 2018, I think. And so in 2018 I was reviewing other people's pitches, and then a couple years later, um basically Lou Rosenfeld, who runs Rosenfeld Media, asked me, "Hey, do you have any ideas? You've seen lots of pitches." And I was like, "I don't know. Maybe." And at first I pitched this idea of like strategic product design, like how to like kind of like I wanted to focus, I think, on software as a service and like have something about like strategy as a designer in the software as a service space. And Rosenfeld was like, "Hey, yes, that sounds maybe like it could be something, but we should figure out how much it resonates with a potential audience." And
Mm.
so then I ran a workshop with that as the focus, essentially. And we got like some bites, but not too many people. I think it was like 17 people or so, which is like, okay, it's not like five. And then we were just kind of like, like the reception to that was okay. So like maybe it's not compelling enough that we'd want to make this a book. So it was very, I think my process was very unique in that, I had like a relationship with them because I had done some acts of service and work with them previously. And so we were just trying to figure out like what would actually be a hit. And so then basically somehow Maven, the like coaching platform, had also reached out like right after I'd run this other workshop, and they were like, "Hey, like, do you want to talk about like being a staff designer or something? Like, do you want to run a class about that? We think that would work really well with our audience." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I've been kind of like toying in my mind with the idea of like maybe that being the book. Like I had written a little bit of a summary about it, and I was like, "Hey, Rosenfeld, I think like this might be something." And so then basically through Maven's platform, I ran a survey where I was like, "Hey, like who's interested in this topic?" And I got like 400 responses from that. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like that is wild." And then the first class, like once I opened registration, got like 40 something people signing up for it. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, this is a thing. Like this is clearly resonating with people." And so basically what was cool is that I had this outline that I had written as part of a proposal for Rosenfeld Media at this point, and I used that outline to start forming the curriculum for the class. And then I was actually writing as I was teaching the first cohort. And so I was making these presentations and like presenting to people, and they would ask me questions in the class. And then I would be like, "Oh, this is something that I need to add to the book." And so it was very symbiotic in that way. So I'm really grateful that everything happened like that. A lot of it is, related to the foundation again that I set, where I was writing a lot of my thoughts. Like the entire time that I was writing this book, I also was like sharing a lot of thoughts on social media about the same topic. And I think that my reflections on my own career history was the thing that led both the publisher and Maven to actually reach out to me. So I really recommend, again, if you have the capacity and the time, um, I think it's great to share the work that you're doing and the things that you're thinking about, because the more that you put your ideas into the world, they resonate with people, and then those people reach out to you.
Before we go deeper, I want to take a moment to thank a few tools that are supporting this season of Growthmates. These are tools I use in my work and recommend to clients, so checking them out is actually one of the best ways you can support the show. First one, Mobbin. Mobbin has been my number one product inspiration source for years. Whenever I'm working with clients or designing a new activation flow, I literally start by checking how top products solve similar problems. Mobbin has thousands of real flows: Figma, Airbnb, Duolingo, and more. And for this season, I curated a special upgrades flows collection, which you can browse completely for free. The link is in the description. Second one, Obi by Core. This one really changed how I think about onboarding. Instead of boring tooltips, Obi creates a personalized onboarding call with an AI assistant that feels almost human. It adapts to you, asks questions, guides you like a trainer, and honestly, it's the first onboarding experience in years that really surprised me. If you're working on activation or education, I really recommend trying Obi. So, if you want to support me, the podcast, and the creators building these amazing tools, all the links are waiting for you in the episode description. All right, let's get back to the episode. I think the fact that you've shared, like you need to share in order to start creating and even publish something, is very, very important. It reminds me about like the creative cycle from like, this the creator act, the way of being book, and sharing is very important part. And I think what is holding us back sometimes is like we are so afraid to start sharing even little pieces, even like we have like I have an idea to write a book, it's very hard to start sharing this, and it's like vulnerable act, right? And I'm wondering, like, was it so natural for you to start doing that, or you struggled maybe a little bit with this sharing element? If you did, what helped you to start sharing at different phases of your process? Because sometimes you shared stuff that is not ready yet to publish, might be not good enough, you know? And what helped you to deal with that and start sharing your work?
Yeah, I totally understand that feeling. And I've had it myself so many times, that feeling that something's not ready or people maybe will judge me or something like that. I usually sit with that feeling and ask myself, is it like, what's the worst that'll happen? For example, is a question that I ask a lot. And usually it's like not that big of a deal. Like I'm still going to be alive. Like I will have shared a thing and gotten feedback, and that's actually probably a good thing. I'll maybe learn something about myself. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I usually will, I basically will have a conversation with myself, because usually that fear is coming from like maybe a younger version of myself, like the 5-year-old or the 10-year-old cat. And I will just kind of like say, like I would basically I say things to myself that I would say to a friend who is feeling that fear. So I'll probably say something like, "Hey, like it's better to have tried than to have not done anything. You're not going to get
Hmm.
closer to what you want to do if you do nothing." And that's again, when it comes to things like finding the time, it's making the time. It's like taking that one little step, because that one step is the thing that gets you closer to the outcome that you want. So I'd rather say that I gave it a shot than to have sat there, not done anything, and then say, oh, like I could have done it better than this person's doing it or whatever. Like that's not, a good use of my time. And I don't know. I think it's really about the kind of person that I want to be when I look back when I'm older. And I would much rather say that I, put in the best chance or the best effort.
Yeah, I love it. And like listening to the practical story that you have done, I think what resonates the most is like you probably applied the design approach to designing your book. Like it's about testing, validating your ideas with a small group. Like a little bit of user research happened when you were doing your Maven cohort, and then I believe right now it's a synergy, right? So you have your book that is fulfilling your course leads, and then you have your course that is more also like probably most of your participants have read your book or like are eager to check it. So now looking at both maybe course and book, some people might be on the crossroads like where to start. Should I start maybe from the course itself and then after a while when I have enough material I will write a book, or the opposite? Because starting both as you did is amazing, but for some folks it might be like, all right, I have my full-time job and my family maybe and the small kid, and it's too much. Maybe I need to start with one thing. And what would be your suggestion?
Yeah, I would suggest starting with probably a class. And I say that because one reflection I had, or one observation that I had over time, is a lot of the people that I know who have written a book will actually have taught about the subject beforehand. So I'm thinking about like Regine Gilbert, for example. She has written several books and she's a teacher and she teaches about the subjects. And then, of
Mm,
course, she's collaborating with other people and doing broader research and things like that for like the written format. But those conversations that she has with students, that's like helpful for her own processing so that she can, actually write the fuller book. So now that I've also done the same thing, in my own context, I definitely would recommend, if you feel comfortable teaching and forming a syllabus, that syllabus essentially over time will end up most likely being very close to what you would want the book to be. And so if you can like take a shot at teaching the class, you'll also, get that validation. And then you will get a built-in audience. So several of my students did actually help read the manuscript version of the book. And then people have asked me, after I announced that the book was available for purchase, or pre-order at the time, they were like, hey, like, I'm interested in this. Can you tell me the difference between the book and the course? And I had an answer for that, of course, which is, the book is more, in some cases, it's more detailed. It's just got stuff that I can't talk about in depth in the live class because then
hmm
the class would be like 20 weeks or something like that. But yeah, like there's stuff that you're not going to get in the book. There's stuff you're not going to get in the course that's different from the book. And so just they ended up being complementary. But yeah, starting with the course meant that I almost had this built-in audience of people who would be primed for wanting to get the book. So I would definitely go in that direction.
Wonderful. And yeah, I also have, I'm like trying to, think about what our listeners are thinking right now, especially ones who have full time jobs. Because when you make a decision to be a solopreneur, like I did, you have plenty of time. It's like, it's your choice where you spend your time on. So I choose, like, do I want to create a course this quarter? Do I want to write a book next year? Like, it's my decision and I have more flexibility with that. So I also don't have to ask for anybody's permission. However, for full-time folks and for people from Mira, Amplitude, I know like people from these companies are listening to this podcast. As you're in Dropbox, so you're pretty representative. Have you faced any, how to say, challenges with that? Like you're doing a lot of things on the side, and I can imagine the situation when somebody in the company or outside the company in the community can start questioning, how do you have time for that? Why you're not spending all your time and energy and 100% of you on your precious full-time job? So if something happened like that in your career, how did you articulate why you're doing these things, or maybe even shown the value, because I'm sure like the things you are doing are making you stronger as a staff designer at Dropbox. But sometimes companies just have a different culture and they just don't understand that it's very valuable. So I really would love to see more people like you in the community who are doing both, because sometimes somebody just make a decision to make a sacrifice and like quit as I did. So, but it's not the only path. This is what I'm trying to say to everyone who is listening. Like, it's not the only path. So, curious from your experience, did it happen or not? If yes, how you managed that?
Yeah, it's so I've had to work with my employers on figuring out, my own schedule. And also, whenever you work on something outside of work, you need to have the company acknowledge that it exists and
Mm-hmm.
that it's your property. So that is something that I always, tell people, like, be upfront and transparent with your company about that. When it comes to work time, there's several approaches. So in my case, I did everything outside of working hours, but my employer was aware and, gave me consent to write this book while I am also employed with them. But I basically like did that outside of my working hours. And so
Mm-hmm.
again, like if you have 40 hours of work, there's a fair amount of extra time that you can spend on other things. And so, I mean, I would say with the book, I was probably spending about 10 hours a week writing. Which like 50 hours, some people work 50 hours, some people work 80-hour weeks. And so I was like, an extra 10 hours just for writing is not so bad. And then outside of that, at the time I had like a partner and like my parents and like friends, and it was all relatively manageable. But yeah, the big thing was just making sure that my employer was aware that I was doing the book. Now, in the past, and this is possibly still a thing. It really depends on where you work. Some employers will actually give you time during the workday to write your book. And so I do know some people who were able to get that consent. I just think that it is a little less likely at this moment in time, just with where the industry is at.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are some cases where it would make a lot of sense, because maybe the company is able to kind of like, say, hey, like our employee wrote this, and like it's maybe partially sponsored by the company or something like that. I know some people who do podcasting that way.
Mm.
So there's ways to work with your employer to make sure that everybody's happy, essentially. I do think that, in this case, like my employer does get to say, hey, the person who wrote the book about staff design works here. And me choosing to be employed with them is like a positive signal for other people who are maybe around my level. And I do like working there. So, that's like great. But yeah, I would say that it is really important to ensure that like your manager and like your company is aware, and to be strategic about, are you going to negotiate so that you can work on your side project during working hours and maybe you just like have less project work, or are you going to go the other route where, you maybe cut like 10 hours that you would spend on like your social life or something like that. And you're going to spend that instead on your project. And that's just, again, priorities, trade-offs. There's pros and cons to both approaches.
Yeah, wonderful. I love these practical things you've mentioned. For example, I didn't think that technically you need to have a consent. Like, this is your thing that you wrote, it's your IP technically while you were employed. I think like if there is a way to document that, I would definitely recommend, because whenever you are leaving the company, you have this agreement where typically it says like whatever you've created during these years, it's like intellectual property of the company. So you need to be careful about that. And that's also good to hear that there are some companies who are allowed to spend their like office hours for podcasts, because it can be a win-win actually. And I wish to see more examples like that. And maybe to end up this chapter talking about your book, can you tell about your mission with that book? It's called The Staff Designer, right? And maybe what are the top three things or like top actions you wish that designers, after reading your book, would start doing like tomorrow, what you're trying to change with that? By the way, if you are new here, besides making this podcast, I also help companies grow meaningful products through Growthmates. My whole career, I've been balancing between user needs and business goals. And the biggest truth I've learned is this: what is good for the user is also good for the business. Over the last 8 years, from Miro to supporting over 25 teams, I've collected a lot of practical frameworks that actually work. And now there are 3 ways I share them. First, my POG advising program. This is where I work closely with your team to build a sustainable, user centric growth system, not just experiments. Second, the onboarding design sprint. It's a short, focused collaboration to fix activation and redesign the first time experience. Many teams see a real uplift very fast. And third, my course, User Centric Product Led Growth in the AI Era. It's a 3 week intensive where we turn a real challenge into a clear growth roadmap. People from Miro, Dropbox, Atlassian, Loom have already taken it, and for podcast listeners, there is a discount with the code Growthmates. If you want to explore any of these, everything is on growthmates.club and the link is in the episode description. And if someone on your team might benefit, feel free to share it. And now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. I'm so happy. It's like physically a thing now in the real world, which is wild.
I love the color palette.
Yeah, I was like, this is my exact color palette. It's like a nice baby pink, and it's got some like nice blue, like a navy and like a baby blue, which is also in my color palette. But yeah, basically, the point of the book is that there needs to be a path for designers who do not want to manage people to continue to progress in their career. And that path does exist, but a lot of people before this book was written were kind of operating within their own separate spheres, figuring it out. And this book aims to be a, kind of stake in the ground that says, hey, this is generally what is consistent across different organizations. So it basically is like an operating manual for the position, and also is an expectation setting tool that designers and managers can use to ensure that they understand how to best utilize a person in this kind of role. So that's the point. It also gives people who are senior and want to grow to staff the clarity to find the gaps between senior and staff that they are currently exhibiting, and then they can actually start to think about filling those. And essentially it's the book that I wish that I had several years ago when I was trying to make that leap. And I only understood what was missing once I actually got there. So hopefully, just by getting this book, you will be a lot better off than I was back in like 2019, trying to make that shift over. And yeah, it's got lots of interviews with people who are at that level, people who manage people at that level, so that you're getting a very diverse array of perspectives, not just my own. But it is also definitely, I like to say it's like almost like a memoir of sorts. So you do get a lot of reflections from me as a person who operates at that level. But, there's lots of other people in there as well. I've talked to so many people about working at this level, and it was just really great to get to actually codify some of that knowledge.
Wonderful. And I love that everything is based on your story, your pain, actually. This is how we start creating things: a business, a book, a course. We live through the pain, we learn how to deal with that, then we have some solutions in place, and then we execute them in different formats. It can be a book, it can be the app. Like consumer apps were designed, most of them like that. And same thing with your book. By the way, as you have just mentioned the path of being just individual contributor. For me, for example, I remember when I was in the crossroads, like 7 years ago or 5 years ago at Mira. And that time, there was no clarity about staff designer, at least in my company. And I just transitioned to management because it was the only way to grow. However, I really wanted that. So the difference was that I really wanted to be a people manager. I think it's my natural thing. So it was super natural. But I saw how people do this migration and transition because of like there is no other choice, especially in technical roles. Like, and I'm curious, like, as we are heading towards 2026 and already imagining we are in the start of 2026, industry is exploding, like AI is like the thing everybody's talking about. That do you predict we can see more staff designers in a way because of AI, or we can see less of them, or we will see a transformation of what is staff designer next year?
Good question. My hypothesis is that like the making part might get a little easier, but we are still going to need people to ask questions. And that is ultimately what the staff designer role does and what designers do in general, right? Like we illustrate potential futures, but the intent behind those futures is actually the thing that matters much more. So I think that this role is only going to get more important because we need to have conversations about where are we trying to go in 3 to 5 years, and these are things that you have to think critically about. So I think that like mediocrity is going to be much easier to reach, and so we will probably see more generic experience design. And I think because of things like that, it's just going to be more important, pretty much in my mind at least, to actually consider like why are we making certain decisions. Like intent is so much more important. Strategy is going to be more important. And yeah, so I my opinion is, or my prediction is like, we are going to need more of those people who can really like peel back the layers and, ask those questions that get people to, answer the question of like, what is the point? So yeah, I think like we'll see what happens with managers as well.
Hmm.
But I do have a hypothesis that like there's going to be a lot of like mid-level designers and like maybe slightly senior designers who just like need somebody who is like doing that design direction. And that is a big part of the job of a staff designer as well. And so like there's a constant question of like, what is the value of a manager? And I strongly believe that managers need to exist. Like we need people who actually figure out like who should be staffed to a project. I just don't think that's very easy for AI to do, frankly. Like there's stuff that's just very human and like soft,
Mm.
and we need people who can think about that. So there's still going to be managers, but I do think that like the big reason that I wanted to write this book now is that there was this realization that like, hey, like maybe somebody who's more hands-on should be, a part of the strategic direction work. So in my mind, we'll probably see more demand for those kinds of people because systems are just going to keep getting more complicated. And especially when you can just prototype anything you want, those questions are just going to get more and more important over time.
Yeah, and I see like in the industry, I see the tendency like these hands-on and managerial part are becoming more and more blended more than ever. So I see like my clients, for example, sometimes they're hiring someone and they say like, we want them to be hands-on, but this is a like high-level management role, and I'm like, how do you imagine that happening? Or sometimes they are trying to hire like a very strong designer and they are expecting them to be great leaders as well. And for example, in this podcast, I already recorded a couple of episodes with folks from Lovable where they have technically no titles. Like they are all doing like let's say design stuff, and they are very hands-on with things. So I'm curious, do you see this trend happening like at Dropbox? Like people are becoming more hands on than before, but maybe this is just a bit more scale up situation where the transformations will happen slower. While in smaller companies, what I see like hands-on is definitely on demand. And however, there might be the thing that, um, let's say, this founding designer concept, people are expecting someone as a founding designer to be more like as a staff designer, at least from what I see. Do you think it's even reasonable to mix these two terms? Because founding designer is the first designer in the company. Can they be staff at the same time if this is just one person in the entire organization covering the design craft?
Yeah. Well, I can't say too much about my employer per se, but I can say that managing people and delivering on the product work itself, those are two really complex jobs in themselves. And so generally I discourage, like I know the lead designer role exists and that
Hmm.
technically is one example of a player coach position. What I will say is that it can be hard to do both of those jobs well. And so a lot of times, instead of seeing 100% of both, you're going to see 50% of each in terms of quality, or 60/40 or 70/30. So maybe you're just going to end up in a situation where your direct reports, you maybe meet with them like once every 2 weeks or like once a month, and you're mostly just working on shipping. Sometimes that's fine. At a small company, that's fine. I think at a larger company, the reality is that you just have so much more complexity in terms of the organization, and navigating that complexity does require hands like a
Hmm.
lot of support, right? You just need more time to workshop, like, how should I go about presenting this idea and stuff like that. And that is one of the things that is critical for a manager to support their reports with. um so I would say that, like, I usually warn people against at large companies, like, merging the manager and like hands-on IC workload, because I've experienced it. It is stressful and overwhelming, and often you're doing a mediocre job at both, or you're just working ridiculous hours. So that's like
Mm.
number one. Number two, when it comes to a founding designer, I do think that there are a lot of skill overlaps between a founding designer and a staff designer. Um, for example, you are going to be thinking and making decisions about the future of a product and an experience, and you're going to be crafting some of the most foundational functional workflows of an experience. So that in itself is probably a lot of scope, and that's
Mm.
great. So on the product side, probably there's still going to be open questions of, okay, well, like, does this design scale, to like 2 years from now? And that is something that I'm often thinking about. I'm thinking about, like, where are we trying to go longer term with this experience? So I would say that if a founding designer is a good founding designer, they are doing that kind of thinking. But I have certainly seen founding designers that are just like, I'm just trying to get through the day. I'm just trying to ship this thing. I don't have time to think about the future. And then they end up designing themselves into a corner. And then the team has to do like a big refactor or a big rewrite of an experience later. So it really depends. And that's something that,
Hmm.
if the founding designer tried to apply for a staff role, that would be a huge question. The other thing that might be harder to sell with a founding designer trying to get a staff role is there's not maybe going to be as much experience of like navigating organizational lines. And
Mm.
so often a staff designer is usually at a company that has like at least 250 people.
Mm.
And when you get to a company of that size, or even bigger, like thousands of people, I mean, you're going to have like directors and like other people that you have to convince. And so a big part of the job is not just shipping the work, and like making sure that the work is scalable, but essentially also figuring out, like, how do I tell this to somebody in a way that actually gets them to say yes and consent to it happening? So yeah, that's like critical. Like, a lot of my job is managing people's feelings and recognizing their fears, and accounting for them in the way that I present my work.
Interesting. And I'm now like already thinking about our theme of this season, like the creating part and creators path. And looking at you and thinking about the industry, it feels like maybe your job also gives you a little bit of from one side playground to think about what to create, what to write about, like experience and stories and like stuff like that, but also a little bit of flexibility, because I can imagine you can really like create these boundaries, like this is my work, it ends like, I don't know, 6 p.m. in the evening, and then I can start creating my stuff. While if you're a founding designer or like in a startup world, I have rarely saw when you can manage your boundaries that well. It's pretty tough. And with that in mind, I'm curious, like, what gives you most energy these days? Does it come from your full-time job? Maybe a little bit comes from that, but maybe there are other sources where you get your energy to keep creating, keep writing, keep teaching, doing your gaming events and stuff, where it comes from.
That's a good question. What does give me energy? I mean, I think that, like, yes, I do get some energy from just like going through the day, and just kind of like reflecting on the experiences that I've had at work recently. That does for sure give me some like things. I don't know, like there have been like moments, like I just wrote semi recently about craft negging as a concept, which is just like when you have situations where like maybe your manager is like very into visual design, and like maybe like they feel like the visual design of of the product could be better, and like how do you can navigate that as a designer. That is like influenced, and like that came from like conversations that I had with other designers at other companies. But like, you know, there were times where I've seen flavors of that in my own work life. So I would say actually maybe a big thing isn't like directly like my day job, but it's the discussions that I have with other people in the industry. I would say that that's like a
Mhm.
large part of it for me. Um, yeah, I would say. Hmm, Also, sorry, this light is like killing me. I'm like,
You have a sunny day. Yeah, like
it's a
lucky
beautiful
you.
day. Yeah, I'm like very
Lucky
happy about
you.
how sunny it is.
Yeah, maybe sun
Okay.
gives you a little bit of energy and New York vibes and like community there and all the things that the city gives to you. Yeah, because I think it really matters a lot where, like, the environment, right? I think when I was reflecting back why I did my change, why I stepped out of my job, why I started all of my solopreneurship things, the important element of that, I needed to change the environment to embrace more change. And sometimes people move, like I had an ex-colleague from Mira who moved to New York exactly because he wanted to be in that particular environment. And I think it's very creative environment. I have, at least in my imagination, people are doing creative things there everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. So that is one thing I will say. So yeah, in addition to like having conversations with people in the industry, surrounding myself with people that I like respect a lot, and just getting to have discussions with those people. I would say that like I'm really grateful to live in New York City, because one thing that it forces me to do is I go outside a lot. And there, you know, there's like pros and cons, there's like highs and lows. I think like a lot of the highs just come down to like the synchronicity, almost like the surprise interactions that you have. There's so many opportunities to go to various like creative events and things like that, exposing myself to a lot of like different worlds and like industries that I wouldn't have thought about. It's surprising sometimes the overlaps that you'll see. So that also often gives me energy. So I'll find my way to the museum or to an event that like I'm interested in like going to, for example, like a security engineering event to understand like what is going on with that. There's just like all kinds of stuff that you can like dig into. And I think like staying curious is really important,
Mm.
because you never know where you're going to draw energy from. So yeah, I think just like taking space, and like almost in a way, it's like making sure that I have a very active life outside of just the day job. That is often, the contrast that is necessary for me to
Mm.
find myself most energized.
Yeah, I think that comes very naturally. Like the creative things come very naturally when you have this time, when you spend time outside. And while I'm thinking about that, I just realized I didn't ask you one very important question about creativity. We talked about good things a lot. And did you have a like creative crisis or something like that when you were stuck, when you like didn't create anything for a year, 2, 3 years, and you felt like really low because of that? I think for people who love creating, when you stop creating, it feels a little bit weird. It feels like I'm not expressing myself, I'm not myself, it's tough. Like, what's going on? Did that happen to you? And if yes, what helped you to get out of that stuckness?
Yeah, I have definitely had moments where I've experienced creative block. One big one definitely was 2020 for, fairly obvious reasons. It's hard to like want to create things when you're literally like worried about like your physical safety. And I also was really struggling at points that year with just like the day job and like maintaining motivation. I
Hmm.
had a lot of conversations with people about that and like the value of creating even when things suck. And of course, shout outs to my therapist as well. But just like acknowledging those feelings, I think was really critical for me because it opened a conversation that I could have with other people and with myself. So I try not to like internalize or like hide a lot of those kinds of things because I've noticed that when I've done experiments and actually just like shared how I'm feeling about something, I will often find that other people feel quite similarly. And then there's like
Mm.
a relief almost because you've like released the feeling and acknowledged it rather than like trying to stuff it down or something like that and like force yourself to like not think about it. So that's number one. And I think one thing that I was really grateful to learn from a coach that I worked with, I would highly recommend career coaching as an aside. A career coach that I worked with, she gave me really good perspective in that, she suggested that maybe it's okay sometimes if you just like don't quite have the energy for something at that moment. Maybe you just are putting it into something else and, your priorities are maybe elsewhere at the time. And that maybe is okay. It doesn't mean that you're not still, in my case, for example, a game developer. So I literally had like a 2 to 3 year period where I was really struggling to like actually like make progress on this project I wanted to make progress on. And later I realized I was really pressuring myself a bunch.
Mm.
And that was part of it. And I just needed to like reconnect with like why I wanted to work on games in the first place. And so I sat with that question a lot and then eventually landed on an answer that felt good to me. But yeah, like it was hard and I had to like figure out what my identity was in a way. Like I had to say see you later to game development. And that part of myself while I was finishing the book, for example, I definitely couldn't make progress on that game. And so yeah, it was really rough. And like I think once I released the pressure on myself,
Mm.
it became a lot easier. So I definitely recommend that. And then there's probably also just a need for rest of some kind because if you are, just putting a lot of energy into other things, you're just not going to have the space and the time to make that progress that you want to make. So, it's either that you need to like slow down and like add more space to your schedule so that you can make progress, or you just need to say, hey, like, I just can't do this right now. And that's okay. And I'm actively making that choice. Remove the pressure from yourself, come back to it later. I also would definitely recommend getting involved in communities because one thing I realized over time is that I was also really isolated. And when I had made a lot of my best work, it was when I was constantly exposing myself to other people in that space who were working on games that I wanted to like in the type of way that I wanted to. So like just in my case, it was like going to weirdo places, like events with other indie game developers, at places in New York, like Boshi's Place and like Wonderville and NYU Game Center, and actually engaging with the community more, going to the Game Developers Conference and just making sure that I actually was like remembering why I got excited about it in the first place.
Mm. I think the first thing that I would take away from your answer is like creativity needs space. And if you are already packed and you cannot move with your baggage, let's say, yeah, it's not the best place to start maybe creating. Let's figure out how to create this space first. And then the community element comes from sustaining this spark and making it turning it into some fire, you know. And the people around you who can support you, who you can share your stories with, can like really motivate you to keep doing your creativity, your creative things. For example, these days I have a lot of people in my network who do LinkedIn posting, newsletter, podcast, courses, because it helps me to keep creating these things. And I'm so grateful for you, Kat, to joining us today, to sharing all of your beautiful stories. I hope like next day after listening this podcast, we will see more designers, and maybe not only designers, who would start doing something on the side and will not be afraid of having their full-time job and not having enough time for that. And at the end, where people can find you, where people can find your book, for sure, we will attach all the links. Where do you keep creating, writing, so people can follow you?
Yes. So yeah, if you want to get the book, it's on Rosenfeld Media's website. When it comes to my stuff, so you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the place where I post definitely the most at this point. But I'm usually sharing content from my blog. So cattsmall.com, CATTSMALL.com. That's where I usually write first. And then I do also have a Blue Sky, and I think it's just cat.design. So CATT.design on Blue Sky. And yeah, I'm trying to just keep it simple, something that's manageable for me. So I've just stuck to Blue Sky and LinkedIn and then my personal website.
Super. All the links will be in the episode description as always. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it in the comments wherever you're listening or watching this. Tell us what else you would like to see. It really, really helps to keep creating, right? Is something I'm trying to inspire others to do. And if you enjoyed that, please share it with your friends, like people who want to start doing something, or other designers in your group. That really, really matters. Thank you, Kat. Very nice
Thank you.
to have you here today.
Yay. Thanks so much.
Super.